All right, so on the last video, we kind of touched on some misconceptions around GT, and I feel like this strand, the service design strand, kind of elucidates some of those misconceptions, clarifies some things because it goes in depth about service options, research-based learning, and how we specifically meet the needs of gifted learners. So it kind of clarifies what it means to be GT through what we offer for GT. So in a nutshell, this strand has us providing an array of services following specific guidelines, grouping students appropriately, providing out-of-school options when possible, and communicating these options to the public, establishing board policy regarding credit by examination, early high school graduation, dual concurrent enrollment, distance learning and/or accelerated summer programs, and addressing the social and emotional needs of gifted learners. So let's dive right in. 3.1 tells us what our learning opportunities for GT students need to include, when to provide the opportunities, whom to inform, and then 3.1.1 highlights the importance of consulting GT specialists and advocates for developing program policies and options. So if you ever have any questions about GT, or if any of your board meetings touch on GT issues, just please reach out and contact me and I'll help clarify some things or answer any of your questions. That's what we're here for. Okay, 3.4 and 3.5 go in depth with how to appropriately group GT students. So in the Texas State Plan, it says that you have to group them appropriately. And then TEA on their website clarified that in order to create flexible grouping, every GT student should be in a classroom where at least 33% of the students are GT. In other words, if you have a classroom of 24 kids, about 8 of them should be identified GT. And that's so that they can work with students with similar needs and abilities. So if questions of appropriate grouping of GT students ever comes up before the board should just be aware that being allowed to work with other students with similar needs and abilities is a fundamental right of gifted learners. All right. 3.6 and 3.6.1 deal with providing out-of-school or after-school options to meet the needs of gifted learners. The board may wish to support out-of-school options by allocating funds to provide opportunities for enrichment and extensions for all learners. It doesn't have to necessarily be like a GT program or GT camp or GT club. Anything will do, anything that provides enrichment or extension. So like UIL, academic UIL, I should say, A+ academics, which is like the elementary level for UIL. Some districts do academic decathlon, some do SAT, PSAT prep, that kind of thing in camps. After school clubs like Girls Who Code or code.org would be fine, robotics clubs, any of that. Any kind of STEM or creativity, any kind of art would be perfect for that. All right. So 3.7 says that we must have board policy supporting credit by examination, and we do, so check that one off. 3.8 says we must provide acceleration and flexible pacing for students to learn at the pace and level appropriate for their needs. We do have procedures for grade skipping, or grade level acceleration as we would call it in GT world. In the classroom, however, a lot of teachers kind of feel uncomfortable not having their kids go in lockstep. It's almost like they need permission to be allowed to let their kids go at their own pace and at their own level. And it's really important for a kid who comes into kinder, reading at a middle school level to not be put in that kind of situation where they're relearning stuff that they learned when they were 2. So this standard kind of gives teachers and campuses permission to take the chains off of those students who can move at a faster pace. And specifically for campuses, it allows campuses to come up with creative systems to allow students to have some wiggle room when it comes to the level that they're learning at or the speed that they're learning. That's really important. All right, 3.9 demands board policy for dual and concurrent enrollment, distance learning opportunities, and accelerated summer programs if available. So the key word there is if available. We do have policy in the areas of dual and concurrent enrollment, distance learning opportunities, and we don't have accelerated summer programs. Accelerated in the sense of GT being like these are courses that allow students to move faster through the curriculum and graduate early, things like that in the summer, specifically for our gifted learners. So 3.11 says that we must develop and implement services that address the social and emotional needs of GT students. And that's a very small standard, but it has a lot of oomph to it. Something that a lot of families and members of the community don't realize is that GT students often come with a lot of social and emotional needs, they often experience things with more intensity. These intensities may involve all feelings and emotions in general. It could be anxiety issues, distractibility, or imaginational issues, we might call it, sensory issues, psychomotor issues. They have trouble being still, like to an extreme degree, a profound need for intellectual stimulation. And if it's not met, then we all know the GT kid who's acted out in class because they weren't getting stimulated in the proper way. Perfectionism, existential crises. This is something that a lot of gifted kids deal with at a very early age, especially if they've experienced some kind of trauma or death. Other things that they have to deal with, imposter syndrome. Some kids are identified as GT, but they don't really feel GT, so they question that throughout their gifted learner experience. Something else that most GT students struggle with is what's called asynchronous development. And it's not like with COVID where you're like an asynchronous learner and you're learning from home on your own time at whatever time you can get on. Asynchronous development for a GT student means that the student may be at extreme levels of understanding in specific or even all content areas relative to their age. So for example, I've met GT kindergartners who read at the college level. Yeah. I've met elementary age GT students who can hold their own with specialists in their field. They're just that into whatever area they're studying, and they can hold long, thoughtful conversations with experts. I've met a high school GT student who ran her own business, while also, of course, earning her associate's degree before graduation. I've taught a GT student on the autism spectrum who struggled with peer interaction, but who was grade levels above his peers in math, for example. So, and just to help give asynchronous development some perspective, just imagine how you would feel if you were a third grader placed into a kindergarten class. All right, so all this is to say that when proposals are brought before the board regarding the purchasing of resources to address social and emotional needs, please consider how the proposal will affect gifted learners. All right.